On the morning of the 31st of October 2014, Virgin Galactic Spaceship 2 was on a test flight. On board were two very experienced pilots. Spaceship 2 detached from White Knight 2 and it fired its rockets and it increased speed. It approached the sound barrier and then it became aerodynamically unstable and it broke apart. Its pilot, Seabold, along with his feet, was thrown from the vehicle. He managed to release himself from his seat. His parachute opened and he began the 9-mile drop to the ground below. And on that fall, he drifted in and out of consciousness. He suffered severe injuries. Tragically, Michael Alsbury, the co-pilot, died in the crash and he was found in his seat among the wreckage. So what went wrong? Well, to understand that, we need to go back and have a look at how this system works. So what happens is White Knight 2 carries Spaceship 2 up to a height of 50,000 feet. Then, as you saw, Spaceship 2 detaches, it fires its rocket, it accelerates, it becomes supersonic, and this is known as the boost phase of the flight. This puts it on an arc up into space, and at the top of that arc, you have about 4 minutes of weightlessness. Then it begins re-entry. And the really important thing during re-entry is that the vehicle slows itself down. And to do that, it has to increase its drag. And it increases its drag by changing its shape. It deploys what's called the feather. And we'll talk about that in a moment. A really important piece here is that at this point, it's a glider. It's unpowered. So the pilots have to be incredibly skilled to land this thing. And that's why they get some of the best pilots in the world. They're ex-NASA or ex-aviation test pilots. So what is the feather? Well, the feather increases the drag on Spaceship 2 during re-entry. So the way this feather works is during the boost phase, when you want to be really aerodynamic, the feather sits tucked in beside the spacecraft. Then during the re-entry phase, both the pilot and the co-pilot deploy the feather and basically it rotates up through 60 degrees, dramatically increases the drag on the spacecraft. Now, there's a two-stage process to how you actually deploy the feather. The first is unlocking and the second is deployment. Now, it's the co-pilot who does the unlocking of the feather. The key piece is you don't unlock the feather before 1.4 Mach, 1.4 times the speed of sound. And the reason why you don't is if you unlock before you're traveling at that speed, the aerodynamic forces are such that it will cause automatic deployment of the feather and increase the drag on the ship, and you don't want that happening. So it's really important that the co-pilot waits till they get to 1.4 Mach, then unlocks the feather. There's an upper limit as well. The co-pilot has to have unlocked the feather by 1.8 Mach. If they haven't, you have to abort the mission. The key takeaway here is you've got a narrow window as the co-pilot for when you can unlock that feather, between 1.4 Mach and 1.8 Mach during the boost phase. So what happened on the day? Well, on the day, Spaceship 2 detached from White Knight 2, as you saw, it fired its rocket and it increased speed. But when it got to 0.8 Mach, the co-pilot reaches down and unlocks the feather. The co-pilot didn't wait for the safe region of 1.4 to 1.8 to unlock the feather. They unlocked it early at about 0.8 Mach. The feather deploys during the boost phase. This increases the drag on the vehicle and the vehicle essentially tears itself apart. But the key here is, why was there not some form of control in place to prevent the unlocking of the feather early? It was known by Skilled Composites, who built Spaceship 2, that unlocking the feather early could lead to catastrophic failure, but they had no control in place because they wanted to minimize automation, and they had the view that pilots of this caliber simply wouldn't make mistakes. And it's here that the NTSB becomes scathing. They say the probable cause of this accident was Scaled Composites' failure to consider and protect against the possibility that a single human error could result in a catastrophic hazard to the Spaceship 2 vehicle. This failure set the stage for the co-pilot's premature unlocking of the feather system as a result of time pressure and vibration and loads that he had not recently experienced, which led to uncommanded feather extension and the subsequent aerodynamic overload and in-flight breakup of the vehicle. For me, the Virgin Galactic crash is a real reminder that human error is something we all suffer from. Even the very best of us, we're all fallible. And if we don't have some form of control in there to manage human error, we will find ourselves in trouble. The key takeaway from this failure is that it wasn't caused by human error, it was caused by the belief that humans were infallible and a failure to put controls in place to manage that fallibility.